the sound fine? Oh, wait. Sorry. Oops. Oh my god. Oh, now it works. Nice. Now I need my mouse to be out of the screen. Okay, alright. Alright, welcome everyone. I hope the pizza isn't working too much on your stomach and everybody is still awake. So welcome to A.C.A as well. It's nice to see so many people joining us in our Antwerp office. I'm glad that this is the second time that we can organize this. Last time was in our Hasselt office. So as A.C.A we have three major offices, one satellite office. The major offices are in Hasselt, Antwerp and Ghent, with Hasselt being our main office. And then we have a satellite office in Leuven. We are with over 280 team members and have 30 plus years of experience. Now, I want to do this very small, but I wanted to share with you what we all do, because some of you might have questions. A.C.A, I do not know them that well. What do they do? So we do actually quite a lot. So first of all, we have a unit that focuses on Atlassian. We have a unit that focuses on custom software development. This is mostly backend, also some frontend. We have an innovation and usability team. They also do like user research and focus on AI and other things. We have a portal and websites team. They mostly use tools like Data CMS to create CMS for customers. We have our cloud team, which Johan, where are you? There. Is a part of, and you heard him like 10 minutes ago. Then we have our mobile apps team. That's where I work at Flutter. And we also do React Native. We also had a React Native meetup a month ago, which was also very fun to have here in our Antwerp office. And then last but not least, we have our data team, which focuses on the data. So that's all I was going to say about our company. And now let's have my talk about full stack Dart. And the question we are really going to pose is it just a possibility or is it the way to go? So we will tackle this by multiple steps. This is me, by the way. I'm a mobile developer here. I've been crafting mobile solutions since 2018. I actually have a lot of experience in Xamarin.NET MAUI stack, but yeah, as you all know, it's not doing that well. So now I'm Flutter focused. Okay, that's about me. Now, the first question we are going to pose is, what do we actually see as full stack Dart, as before we are going to introduce which components we will use? And actually, the question is, what do we see as full stack? So, first of all, this is an official definition that I found that maybe not from a so official website. But full stack development encompasses the complete process of application software development, including both the front and backend development. Basically, when we talk about full stack, we can actually see it in multiple ways with Flutter. You can look at it being the way you have a mobile application and you create the backend yourself, then you're doing full stack. You can do Flutter Web with the backend, which is full stack as well. Or how we do it at A.C.A for some projects is we call it full stack plus. We are doing both mobile, both web and backend development with Dart. So let's talk about the full stack components and which technologies we will use for that. Spoiler alert, you probably already know that we are going to use Serverpod, because Johan said it multiple times, but I didn't think that through when I was making these slides. So first of all, let's talk about Flutter Web. What is Flutter Web for the people that do not know it yet? You can basically run your Flutter app on the web in the same fashion as you know it, just your normal application. It's almost by changing nothing runs in the web. There are some caveats, I will talk about them later. Basically it uses CanvasKit or HTML renderer or Squasm to draw everything on the web in a bit in the same fashion than you have Impeller on mobile. We can reuse both the logic and the UI for our mobile application, which allows us to do very cool things and create user experiences that are completely uniform to each other, both in a website and on a mobile. So Flutter Web, what are its caveats? you almost have no SEO. Actually, today I saw Eric Seidel talk about this on Twitter, that he might be looking into this. So who knows? Next year I can say we have SEO. It has some slow load times. It loads up almost like the whole application up in front. You can defer some parts of it, and we're actually today we're investigating on how to increase the loading speed of our application. So this might be a cool lightning talk if we figure it out, or someone else has figured it out. Some other caveat: not all Flutter libraries support Flutter Web. You can look it up later on. I will talk about it as well in pub.dev. You see it whether the package you want to use supports Flutter Web. But there is another thing. It's called Jasper. I think Koen posted about it. I do not have any experience with it, but I thought it was cool to put it out. So basically what it does is you create native DOM elements. So you will actually have a div and an h1 using also Flutter in like an HTML way. I don't have experience with it, but it should decrease your loading times. And you would have the possibility to use SEO and also have server-side rendering. But the downside is you lose like the possibility to just run your mobile app on the web, because you need to rewrite some of the components. Would be cool if someone has experience with that, maybe for a talk, or someone else out here in for the future. Now let's talk about the backend. So I brought to you 3 solutions. You already know we're going to use Serverpod. So I don't have experience with Shelf, but it's a very light web server middleware. It's great for custom setups because it does not have that many default components, which Serverpod has. So if you want to do your own thing and really build out like a bit your own framework, how you want to work with it, Shelf might be your go-to thing. It's really battle tested as well. Pub.dev runs on it, and it is published by the Dart team, meaning you can count for its quality and problem maintenance as well. Then another notable mention is Dart Frog. It's actually, I'm not too sure anymore, but I think it's a wraparound Shelf. It's very well documented. It's developed and maintained by very good ventures. They are like very known and already always out there on every conference. You see them quite a lot. Don't have experience with it, but it's a bit the same. It's very lightweight, it's very customizable, so if that's your cup of tea, go for it. Now, we use Serverpod. I have a bit more context about it because I know more about it. Basically, it's a Dart native backend. It has its focus on Flutter integration. What it basically does is I will go into technical detail later on in my talk, but it generates us the client, while for the other tools, it wouldn't be that different to creating your backend, say with Express.js or with Java, because the other layers that you will already have, you will have to rewrite them as well in your mobile or web application. While doing it with Serverpod, all that logic is generated. It uses remote procedure calls. It's also an opinionated framework. Now, what does opinionated means? It's basically that almost all of the choices about which tools you're going to use, they're already made for you. It doesn't mean you need to use them, but they're there. So for instance, it comes with a built-in ORM system with migration support, which is really nice. It comes with almost out-of-the-box authentication support. It has already a structured organization. You can customize it, but that's what it comes with. And we're really a fan of that because we are not backend developers by nature. So I think it's good for us that it's already thought about it by someone else who has that experience, and we can just use it and leverage it to create good solutions without investing that much time to it. It also has a built-in monitor, which Johan talked about it, but use it with caution because there are some things you miss if you have a good production setup with your hosting. It also has a mini variant. Basically, one of the downsides about Serverpod is that it requires a Postgres SQL database, and that is expensive. But sometimes you do not actually need the database because you are a real backend for front-end Which a real backend for front end would it be? It would be that you only act like a server in the middle, and you just redirect calls to different other third-party APIs. And for that, you have the mini variant. You can also switch between them, so it's very fine if you start with mini and just later on you have an extra feature and you know, I need a database. You can upgrade. So that would not be an issue. There are also a lot more things. I'm not going into deep into everything. Might be for the future. Now, why do we actually use Serverpod? So the reason why we use it is because it allows us to go lean and mean. Because everything is already thought out, we can quickly bootstrap a backend, but we are not limited by the framework in terms of scalability. We are not the experts in backend development, said it before, so I think it's good that things are laid out. And it's a growing company with a lot of drive to create the next backend tool. If you see them online or at FlutterCon, they give a lot of talks, and they are actually now, I think last year they were with 3 people or 4, and now they're with 8 or something, so they're growing. And also it's very well documented. And they have a good AI bot, by the way, which is trained on their GitHub repo and also their documentation, which you can use to ask some questions. Now, this is our vision on Dart full stack. So we have an Android, iOS, and web app, which runs on Flutter. Then we have Serverpod, which acts as our backend, which is hosted on Azure. And with Serverpod, yeah, you can communicate to an authentication component and other third-party APIs. Now the second important question is, when do you go full stack? Is it always? Is it never? We start by deciding that during the discovery phase with the customer. So what you will most likely do is look into what does the customer need. You also analyze technical requirements, because some customers, they have the wish that all the backends are written in Java. So in that case, yeah, you cannot do that. So you need to look to a different solution. And you also need to decide on which components are relevant. If you're thinking about making a portal that nobody will use because everyone will have the app installed via an MDM, yeah, don't make it. So, of course, depending on the needs of the customer and the users of your project. There are also some other things to look into when deciding that. It's not only like, yeah, we need a portal, okay, let's build it with Flutter Web. It's not always the case. There's like the question, do we need SAO? We have made a Flutter application for mobile apps. It's called Imovlan, about emo properties. Yeah, it's a bit hard to move that to Flutter Web because you do not have anything with SAO, and you want to have SAO because otherwise when everybody searches on Google, nobody finds anything, so you cannot do it there. Also the need for any web-specific tools, maybe the customer also has an existing component that they want to use. That's also a very good question. And also how much of the app is shared, because the major strength of using Flutter Web is that you can share all of the things between your mobile application and your Flutter Web. So those are mainly the things to think about. Mainly it comes to following type of projects, dashboards, management systems, portals, internal tooling. Those are mainly the type of projects you can see working with Flutter Web. I'm not saying that the others aren't possible, but mostly these will be the types. When to use Serverpod? Also the questions here, how complex is my backend? The main reason why I say that is because, I said it before as well, we're not backend developers. And sometimes there's a need for a whole complex backend with maybe complex architectures like CQRS or a service bus. And I'm not saying you cannot do them with Serverpod, but it doesn't also mean that it's a good idea to do it. Because there are people who are a lot more experienced than I can speak for myself, but maybe not for you, that have more experience with those architectures, with other technologies. And maybe then it's a good point to say, maybe creating the backend as a full stack Dart isn't the way to go forward. And fortunately, we as A.C.A, we have also a team that has that experience with backends. So in that case, we combine the project and we create a mobile app and they can create the backend. But those are important things to think about. As well, can we start with Serverpod Mini? It might be a bit easier on your hosting, so it's a good thing to think about. And yeah, last but not least, know the capabilities of your team. It's very important to know. In practice, we mostly tend to go with Serverpod when we have a BFF+. Now, what is a BFF+? It doesn't necessarily mean, like what I said earlier, only calls that redirect to a different service, but you can also store a bit of data, like some user configuration, the user management. We often have like a user management system that we create with Serverpod. Then we use that to communicate to other third-party services, and there's like a few extra features which we need to have in our own database. That is mostly the idea to think about when to go with Serverpod or not, because yeah, you know, projects can grow, and if you already start with it very technically, very complex, then maybe Serverpod is not the best way to go, but that's just opinion. It might be a bit the same that I'm saying all over again, but basically it comes down to this. Having a tool that can do the things you want does not necessarily mean you should use it. I think that's a very important thing to go by. Basically, you can also use an Excel sheet as a database, but that doesn't mean it's a good idea. And these tools are very powerful. Serverpod is very powerful. You can quickly create a backend. It's so easy, it's so good documented, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't be critical about what you're actually doing, because you're still probably delivering a project to an enterprise customer. And it's the same thing with the hosting that Johan earlier explained. You can easily move your Serverpod or your Flutter web page, move it on Firebase. It's fine, it will run. But at some point, you will need extra things, and those are the things that you need to be careful for. So keep that in mind, I would say. Now let's get a bit more technical. Now that we have cleared out when and what we see as full stack, so how do we actually do it? Flutter Web is actually pretty easy, and in order to set it up, you can actually just create Flutter, use the Flutter create command. Automatically it creates a web component, or you can add it behind the platform's options. To add it later on, you can just run flutter create dot platforms web, and then you will add the web component later on. It's as easy as it gets, actually. Now, for the architecture part, we actually do not change anything that much in our app architecture. However, we do focus on dynamic size changes. Mostly we use media query.sizeOf, but you also sometimes use a layout builder. It depends on whether you want the whole width of your view or the whole width of your page. We use it to decide on breakpoints, and we also find out that if you do that right, you also get tablet support almost for free. So that's very important to go by. We also need to ensure package compatibility, what I talked about earlier. You can see on pub.dev which platforms the packages support, so keep it in mind that not everything supports web. Most of them do, but some of them don't. So, and also, we don't do it, but definitely look into Vosselen. We have required dependencies. We are depending on get, so we're blocked. But if you don't use get, look into Vosselen, because it should increase the performance of your Flutter web, which I really want, but I can't have right now. Okay, CI/CD. Earlier as shown by Johan, we use Bitrise, not since long ago, but right now we do, and I'm fairly happy with it. Now, how do we actually build our website and push it to Azure? It's fairly easy. So run flutter build web in release mode. Then these scripts, yeah, these are the CLI toolings that you need to install on Bitrise. The static web CLI tool is actually an NPM package. So then you log in the Azure command line tool, and then you run SWA deploy. You pass your app name The environment, very nice to know if you would ever use Azure. But you have environment production, but if you run environment, I'm not sure what the other word actually is, but if you don't add it, then it's like a preview. So that you can actually use on your pull request builds to actually have a site you can serve to, which might be nice to investigate. But this is almost all our pipeline. There are some extra things we do, but are irrelevant to this, but it's as easy as it gets. Now, what is our experience with Flutter Web? Design is important because the focus that we have is to have a uniform customer journey, which means that most of the time we will use the same components on Flutter Web than we use on Flutter Mobile. But it also means they need to be designed very well, because on mobile you have different events. You have like a swipe, but on the web you do not do swipes normally. So it's very important for your designer to focus on that and tell them like, hey, we need good components that we can reuse and are both suitable for web and for mobile. It's easy to get going if the requirements are clear. Sometimes conditional imports are necessary, which you can actually easily do. Is when you have a library that is not supported by Flutter Web, you can just do a conditional import and let it import about some other package that has the same interface. Hot restart is slow. You don't have hot reload, which is cumbersome. Also an open issue for like 5 years or something. General performance is bearable, I would say. Other people of the team, they find it very nice. I'm maybe a bit more critical, so others might find it very well, but I think I can see it that it's not that smooth, but can't speak for Vosselen, so very looking forward to it. And the slow load times issue. There are some other things, don't forget it. Don't forget about mobile and web. It took a while before we actually were like, oh, yeah, you also have mobile and web, because when I pick my phone up, I can still search to that site. Also, don't forget to increase the version of your application, because that will do, when you increase the version, you will not always clear the cache. There are some issues with it. We're still investigating that as well, so if we ever find everything out, it will be a lightning talk. And everybody can navigate to any page at any time. Keep that in mind, because sometimes you might forget about it. Now, Serverpod. I hope everything was clear about Flutter Web, but basically the general experience is like it's easy to apply it to your already existing project. There are some small things here and there, but nothing that major. So, setting up Serverpod, also not that hard. Dart pub global activate Serverpod CLI, which is the CLI tool of Serverpod. You can create a Serverpod project with Serverpod create with a name, my backend for frontend. -- mini ensures you have the mini variant, and to upgrade from the mini variant, you can just run Serverpod create dot. Now, a big slide. This is the overall architecture that we are using inside our applications before and with Serverpod. I will try to explain it on why it's so massive. But basically, before we use Serverpod, we have a Flutter application that mostly has a layered architecture. It's for a reason that we do this. We have created it based on past experiences and is focused on a bit larger projects where you can really have the scalability and where you can also easily switch between different backends if you would need so in the future, that you don't need to rewrite your whole application. So you have the domain layer, an API repository layer, an application layer, and a presentation layer. We use MVVM, so hence the presentation layer contains all that. Right now, when we have Serverpod, what we can basically do is we can pick the logic that is inside this API layer and the application layer, and we can just move it over to our Serverpod. Now, why don't we just remove these? Exactly for the thing that I explained earlier. Right now we will use Serverpod, but it doesn't mean that in the future we will use something else that that's the reason why we still have our own domain models and our own API layer, which is of course completely slimmed down because all the actual code is generated by Serverpod. And that's how we can still, with such a heavy architecture, don't spend a lot more time on having a backend for frontend with Serverpod because of all that code generation. And that's also the following slide, code generation with Mason. It helps us quite a lot. Basically, for the people that do not know what Mason is, it's a template generator which helps Steam generate files quickly and consistently by pre-gen and post-gen hooks, which basically allows you to run any bus script you want in Dart, and mustache templates. And we use it for quite a lot of things. We use it for creation of our projects. Actually, the whole outline of our application with all the different layers is completely generated by Mason. It also allows us, instead of a normal scaffold, have us to be very updated with the very latest version of Flutter, because all the pub-get and all the Flutter create commands are run with the pre-gen and the post-gen hooks. We also use it to apply in our own architecture. For instance, we have a Mason brick that when you run Serverpod create, afterwards we run that brick, and then our whole architecture is put in place and we can just start developing. Also for new views, new models, because we have a lot of reusability. We have a lot of models that are there in our domain. We also have a DTO, but it's always almost the same, but that's merely by accident, because in the future it might not be. So that's why we also have a brick for that, so that we just, with running that brick, saying, hey, these properties, we want them, it just generates us all the code and puts it in the right place. And it also helps us to reuse the same folders within our layered architecture, so everything is clearly laid out. Also large components like authentication within our Serverpod, we have a brick for that, so we just have to run it, and like 90% of our whole authentication setup is done. Serverpod ORM, it has a custom ORM system, which is really nice. An ORM system basically is in place to go from your object in Dart to a relational model which is in your database. It uses native Dart types and no safety. This is an example of it. Basically, you say what the class is. If you will use it in the database, you need to add the table. Later on, we will also use these generators to generate our DTOs between our Serverpod and our mobile or web application, but without the table. And then you put there your fields. It's very easy. It generates us the code afterwards when you use Serverpod generate. You can also create automatically the migration. So using Serverpod create migration, Serverpod will automatically create a migration file. You can, of course, adjust it later on. Say, for instance, something went wrong, but most of the time, if you don't do anything that crazy, it just creates an auto migration, and you can start up the application doing -- apply migrations, and then the migrations are applied automatically. This is an example of the code, how you can then later on query your database, put objects in it, and so on and so on. So everything is actually very clean. It's all type safe and stuff. It's all generated by Serverpod generate. Now, an endpoint of Serverpod. You can create separate endpoints with multiple RPC calls. That's what Serverpod uses. You need to return a primitive data type, a void or a serializable object. In order to create that serializable object, we go back to this, leave out the table. This is a serializable object when you run Serverpod generate. We put them in different folders, so it's clear which ones are our DTOs and which ones are the ones that we use in our database. And again, you run Serverpod generate to create your whole client as well. Who would have guessed it? Here's an example endpoint. We also have the automatic require login support, so when you use Serverpod authentication, you can easily say, hey, this endpoint needs to be authenticated and this one does not. This is an example of an endpoint. It's just a method and you return the DTO and run Serverpod generate, and this is what you can do at the client side. You need to create the client in your constructor. I didn't put it there, not that difficult. Then you just do client.versions because it's on the versions endpoint, and you can just call the method and it's completely type safe. CI/CD as well here with Serverpod. It's a bit different. We using containerization as explained by Johan. I'm also looking into doing containerization with our Flutter Web, but right now we do not do that yet, but in the future that might be a good way to go forward. Basically run Docker build, add some tags and push it to your repository. Here at A.C.A. we have our custom repository. I will not explain it further. It's a Harbor repository. I'm looking to Jan. Okay, yes, correct. But basically it doesn't matter what you actually use. The only downside, sorry Johan, is that Azure does not automatically pick up our new containers. So we set the image names to our configuration of both the insights and the normal app service container that we have on our hosting, and we restart these web apps using the Azure command line tool. Now, a thing that I want to go a bit more in depth in, Johan started the conversation, is about secret management. It's a very important one because right now your container will be online, and by default Serverpod has these passwords.yaml files and also I think they're called like production.yaml, staging.yaml and some other ones, and you would normally put your secrets in there, but that means that they are in Git and they are inside your container. Even when you move them to CI/CD, they're still in your container. So that's why we inject them at runtime in the container using Azure Key Vault and as an environment variable. Here below you can see environment variables in the Azure platform. You can just put an environment variable there and you can link it to the Key Vault. In order to use them, you can use platform.environment with your key in your backend, and then you have your key and it's injected when you do Docker run in Azure. And that way you can use secrets the right way. Secrets are not stored in a container anymore. The other thing is you need to reuse the containers throughout the different environments, because normally you would set your environment variables when you do Docker build, but you will not do Docker build anymore now because you do it at the Docker run. So you need to have the same container and move it to all the different environments. So what we most likely do right now is we have it in a repository, it has a certain tag, and when we bump it to staging or production, we just link it to the correct tag and then it gets deployed. You can change the secret and simply restart the container. Johan explained, say for instance, hey, a third-party API has a new API key because the other one was invalid. You do not need to do that much. Just change the secret, restart the container, everything is fine. Another thing to do is to not use the passwords .yaml and production.yaml. I already said don't use it, but it doesn't mean automatically that you can inject everything. So you need to look up which key. This was totally not explained very clear. I'm sorry. Basically, for every thing inside these files, there is a certain key. And if you set the value to that key, then it will use that value that you set to it as the value instead of the passwords.yaml file. I hope that was a bit more clear. Now, our experience with Serverpod, it's very easy to start with limited knowledge of backends. It's also very stable. It has a very good performance right now. The default insight solution is also pretty awesome. We still have to decide for it long term. I think it's better to move to a different solution, but especially for testing and staging environments, it's really awesome how clear you can actually see everything from a session ID is linked to all the errors that you get, to your database queries, and so on and so on. And we also like the flexibility to go from the mini to the full version. The only major downside I see is that you have a Postgres login by default. But it comes with a lot of good stuff. The ORM is very well. It has nice support for the other things. We have also added a few things, or changed a bit a few things to how we work with Serverpod. We created some seeders to seed our database that are run every time the server is set up, and it will check, has the seed already run? If not, then you run it. Basically, the reason why we would do something like that is we have a lot of data in our database. For instance, when you have a platform where you can have a subscription, you put all the subscriptions in our database. But if you put them in your testing database, they do not automatically come in your staging and production database. But when you put it in a seeder, and it runs every time it startups, when you then up your server to a different environment, then it gets run anyways. The default authentication component, which we have made, powered by Mason, is a really nice one. We can set up authentication linked to Firebase very quickly. The dynamic creation of the environment files, and we can transfer our architecture over to create a sustainable backend. It's something that we really liked in the process, because right now you do not need to think different when you work on the backend versus having a project where there is no backend. Now, the major question: should you go full stack? And the answer is, it depends. It really depends. I tried to explain a lot of different things, a lot of different opinions on how we decide when to use full stack, but the same might not apply to you. So I would say, think critically about everything, and I'm sure you will find the right solution for your problem. I want to thank you for your attention. I want to say a small thing. So I went pretty high level. I didn't go into deep, but I hope it was interesting anyway. But the main idea is that this is more of a conversation starter to have more follow-up talks, because Dart full stack is so broad and there are so many things to talk about. You cannot have everything covered from Serverpod in one talk. But I think it might be interesting if some people have experience in several specific parts, that they give a lightning talk about it. Like, for instance, this week we were doing on Flutter Web universal linking. How to set up universal linking might be a good lightning talk. We might give it next time, but that's the main idea, and I think it's really nice to have Dart with its full stack capabilities. And if there are any questions, you can post them to me now or later. And thank you for listening.